Blessings to you, Rob Harrell with Talks from the Chair. I'm reading this book and finishing it up. Edmund Gosse, Father and Son. It's a book that was written in 1907, and it's written from the perspective of the son, Edward, and he writes what could be dubbed as a psychological biography expressing his life growing up with his father. His father was a minister associated with the Plymouth Brethren, which was a religious sect, and in some cases known for their strict views on things. The father was extremely strict, a very hard religionist, you might say, and was very devout in his beliefs. He tried to practice what he believed, coming from a very Christian but very, again, rigorous kind of perspective and interpretation of passages. And he impressed this religion, this hard, austere lifestyle and belief system upon his entire family and even his church. And this was extremely difficult for his son to grow up in this environment, and it created all kinds of psychological and emotional problems with the son. I haven't finished the book yet, but I've gotten certainly a great gist of what's going on. But one particular episode I thought I would comment on had to do with the son at a particular point, as he's about 13 years old, trying to find his own way and make friends. He was invited to a particular party. Let me just read this portion to you briefly here. The boy writes, "I remember on one occasion when the Browns, a family of Baptists who kept a large haberdashery shop, a men's clothing shop in other words, in the neighboring town, asked for my pleasure in accompanying me or having me accompany them to, quote, tea and games." This was something that we would just laugh at nowadays, but this was, I guess, something for some that was questionable, a questionable activity. And he goes on to say that my father's conscience was so painfully perplexed that he desired me to come up with him to a certain room and that they might lay, quote, the matter before the Lord. The father had this notion, knowing that this was, at least in his mind anyway, a terrible thing because it could involve all kinds of secular activities as he understood them and things that could lead his son down the dark path. He thought the thing to do is to take my son upstairs and we would kneel down, which is what they did, and we will pray, bring it before God. And certainly God would give us the clear answer, he thought. My father prayed, he goes on to say, aloud with great fervor, that it might be revealed to me. You see, his father already knew the correct answer in his mind, by the voice of God, whether it was or was not the Lord's will that I should attend the Browns' party. My father's attitude seemed to me to be hardly fair, since he did not scruple to remind the deity of various objections to a life of pleasure, and of the, quote, snakes that lie in the hidden grass of evening parties. So the father, again, put him in this situation, and they prayed very earnestly, pleading with God for clarity to this problem. And then the father says to the son, we have asked him now to direct you to a true knowledge of his will, the father says to the son. And so he asks his son, what did God tell you as we have sought his will as to whether or not you should go to this party? And the son says this, and this was very atypical of the boy. Quote, the Lord says I may go to the Browns. Unquote. He goes on to say, my father gazed at me in speechless horror. He was caught in his own trap. I won't go on any farther, Other than to say this, because I think this brings up an interesting thought here, an interesting point regarding the matter of prayer. If we come at prayer with our minds already made up, believing we already know the answer, there really is no point to praying, is there? The father was so sure that it was wrong for his son to go to this party. He thought he would, again, in a sense, instruct his father because he was always in a teaching mode. He never just conversed normally as a father would and son. He didn't give him much slack at all. He didn't give him freedom to think for himself. He always was the instructor, and he thought, I will just show my son that this is the right thing. And again, if we come in prayer with that same mentality that we already know the answer, we're simply going to go through the procedure for some purpose, then we've lost. We've failed at the task. We should always be praying, if it is thy will. It should always be conditional. Of course, the great example is Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. Father, not my will, but thy will be done. If it be your will, let this cup pass from me. But if not, thy will be done. We must always be willing to hear the answer from heaven. If we are not willing to hear, then everything else is pretense. Let's be careful then. Think about this. Let's be careful, again, that we truly are wanting to hear from God when we ask him for an answer. May the Lord give you direction and understanding on this. And again, have a great day today.